All right, welcome. Have you ever finished a book and wondered what happens next? Not just the plot, but what if the characters could actually sit down with the author and talk about what they went through? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on the fantasy story Bibliomancers to see exactly that. We are diving deep into a very specific part of the story, Chapter 70. Now, this isn't your typical chapter. It's not part of the main quest or anything. No, this is something special. It's like a post-game interview, a debrief between the author and the characters she created. And that's the whole kind of meta premise here. The author, who is actually a character in the story named Rose, is having these one-on-one conversations with her main crew, Maria, Cormac, and Ronan. It's basically their chance to hash it all out, the good, the bad, the ugly, and why their journey had to be the way it was. So, let's kick things off with the protagonist, Maria. Rose checks in with her to see how she's holding up after everything, especially after some of the, well, let's just say, some of the really tough scenes Rose put her through. And Maria, she does not hold back. She immediately brings up one of the most traumatic things that happened to her, being forced to walk into a city completely naked to face down a tyrant. You gotta remember, for Maria, this wasn't just some abstract plot point. It was real. It was cold, it was terrifying, and it was humiliating. And this, right here, is what's so interesting. It perfectly captures that disconnect between what an author intends and what a character actually goes through. On one hand, Rose saw it as this big moment of empowerment. But for Maria, in that moment, it was just pure fear, cold, and a desperate struggle to survive. But then Rose explains, hey, this wasn't just me being cruel for no reason. She lays out her whole master plan. As you can see, it was a very deliberate three-step arc. First, Maria gets this horrible label, the fallen woman. Then she's told, you know what? Own it. Throw it right back at them. And that all culminates in that final, difficult scene where she transforms that shame into real, undeniable power. And boom, here's the payoff. Maria thinks about another similar scene that happened later on, and she admits, you know what? The feeling was totally different. She says, I wasn't cold then. The fear was gone. The transformation worked. She actually did feel powerful.
So the whole debrief ends on a super high note. Even after all that trauma, Maria gets it now. She sees the bigger picture of her own story, and she's so fired up about it that she's immediately like, sign me up for the sequel, which for an author is pretty much the best feedback you can get.
Okay, so next up is our hero, Cormac. And with him, the conversation kind of shifts gears. It moves away from the character's experience inside the story and more towards how the story was received out here, in the real world. Cormac brings up this pretty harsh review he got from his own grandfather. His grandpa, who was an activist himself, basically dismissed the whole thing. He couldn't see past the surface and just called Maria a slutty princess. He told Cormac he should be doing real work, like saving whales. It's a total clash of generational values. But Rose has a comeback, and it's this awesome personal story that's the complete opposite. She talks about her own grandmother, who was just incredibly open-minded. Instead of judging Rose and her girlfriend, she gave them a cottage and basically said, hey, this looks like a great place for you two to live together. It's just a perfect contrast. And this is the really smart point Rose makes. His grandfather's judgment is totally unfair. He's judging Cormac's work by the standards of his own past in Greenpeace. The context, the times, the goals, they're completely different. It is a classic case of comparing apples to oranges. But here's the thing. Even with that family drama, Cormac is totally unfazed. He had a blast being the hero, and he's all in for a sequel. For him, the creative experience was way more important than what some people thought about it. All right, now for the last one, and honestly, this debrief is where things get really weird. Rose connects with Ronan, who, if you remember, serves a very, very powerful patron god. Yeah, this conversation kicks off with a bang. Ronan just drops this bomb on her. My god has a bone to pick with you. So suddenly, this isn't just a simple chat with a character anymore. It's a divine complaint from a god against the author. So Rose is just completely thrown. I mean, think about it. Why would a trickster god be mad at an author? Ronan's god is Loki, the Norse god of mischief and chaos. What could she have possibly written that would get under the skin of the ultimate trickster? And oh my gosh, Rose's response here is just chef's kiss. It's brilliant. She doesn't back down. She completely reframes it. She points out that by tricking the reader into thinking Loki wasn't real in her story, she was playing his own game. She managed to trick the god of tricks. And her argument is, a chaotic guy like Loki shouldn't be mad, he should be impressed. It's like the ultimate tribute, right?
So, after she handles that whole angry god situation, the conversation does what all the others have done. It turns to the future, to the idea of a potential Bibliomancers sequel.
So Rose starts brainstorming some ideas. The new story would jump ahead about 17 years. Maria would play both her older self, the queen, and her own teenage daughter, which sounds tricky. Ronan would be back as the prime minister. But Rose immediately spots a big problem. Making Ronan, who's now much older, a love interest for the 17-year-old daughter? Yeah, that could get creepy fast. And Ronan's like, yep, I totally agree. That would be creepy. He's self-aware enough to see it, but he still wants to be part of the next adventure. He even suggests a new role for himself, maybe as a true neutral character, just showing how committed he is to this world Rose built.
So when you boil it all down, the big idea from this chapter is that for an author who really loves their world, the story doesn't just stop at the end. The characters keep on living, thinking, and even evolving in this ongoing conversation with their creator. And that leaves us with this really cool question to think about. If a story never truly ends for the characters, what does that say about the author?